The widow Katherine Zimmerman pressed her dirt-stained palms against the kitchen table and tried not to let the tears fall as the banker's words echoed in her mind like a death knell. 3 months. That was all she had left before the bank seized her farm, the land her husband had died, protecting just 2 years prior during a raid by cattle rustlers who'd never been caught. Now, it was September 1878, and the crops were failing. The well had run nearly dry, and she was out of options in this unforgiving corner of Ruby City, Idaho. She moved to the window and stared out at the brown, withered fields that should have been golden with wheat by now. The drought had strangled every hope she'd planted in spring, and without the harvest money, she couldn't make the payment. Her only remaining cow had stopped producing milk 3 days ago. The chickens were barely laying, and the fence posts were rotting faster than she could replace them. At 24, Katherine had already buried a husband, lost a baby to fever, and was about to lose everything she had left. The sound of heavy footsteps on the porch made her spin around, heart hammering. Nobody visited this far from town anymore, not since word had spread that she was broke and desperate. Through the dusty glass, she saw the largest man she'd ever laid eyes on, broad-shouldered and towering, with dark hair that hung past his shoulders and a thick beard that couldn't hide the strong line of his jaw. He wore buckskins and carried a rifle with the ease of someone who'd been born with a weapon in his hands. Katherine grabbed her late husband's shotgun from beside the door and cocked it before pulling the door open just wide enough to speak through the gap. "This is private property." The man raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. His eyes were a startling blue-green, like the river in summer, and they held none of the meanness she'd learned to expect from strangers. "Madam, I don't mean any trouble. Name's Finn Garrett. I've been tracking through the mountains for 3 weeks, and I saw your light. I was hoping you might spare some water for my horse and maybe let me sleep in your barn for the night. I can pay." "I don't need your money." The words came out harder than she intended, but she was tired of feeling vulnerable. "Then I'll work for it," he said simply. "I can see your fence line is down in 3 places, your barn door's hanging crooked, and that well pump needs a new seal. I'm good with my hands, and I don't mind hard work." Katherine studied him through the crack in the door. Mountain men weren't uncommon in Idaho, but most of them were gruff, unfriendly types who preferred animal company to human. This one had a gentle way of speaking despite his intimidating size, and something in his eyes made her think of her father before he died when she was 16. Honest, straightforward. "The barn is open," she said finally. "There's a water pump by the trough. Don't come to the house." He nodded once, slowly. "Thank you, madam. You won't regret the kindness." She watched him lead his horse, a sturdy Appaloosa, toward the barn. Even from a distance, she could see the muscles in his arms and back working beneath his shirt as he carried his saddle and gear. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd spent his life outdoors, navigating dangers she could only imagine. When he disappeared into the barn, she finally closed the door and leaned against it, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake, or if maybe, just maybe, Providence had sent someone to help. That night, Katherine couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the stranger in her barn, wondering what kind of man chose to live in the mountains alone, what he was running from or searching for. The wind picked up around midnight, rattling the loose shingles on the roof, and she pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders as she sat in her rocking chair by the cold fireplace. She couldn't afford to waste wood when she didn't absolutely need it. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the rooster was crowing and pale dawnlight was seeping through the curtains. Katherine rose stiffly, her back aching from sleeping upright in the chair, and went to the kitchen to start coffee. When she looked out the window, she froze. Finn Garrett was already awake and working. He'd stripped off his shirt despite the morning chill, and she could see the powerful muscles of his back and arms as he swung a hammer, fixing the barn door. His skin was bronzed from sun and weather, and scars crisscrossed his shoulders, telling stories of a hard life. He moved with purpose and skill, each strike of the hammer precise and effective. By the time Katherine had dressed and made herself presentable, she could hear him working on something else. She stepped outside with a cup of coffee and found him at the well, his tools spread around him as he disassembled the pump mechanism. "Morning, madam," he said without looking up. "Your pump seal was completely worn through. I've got a spare piece of leather that should work until you can get a proper replacement." Katherine approached slowly, carrying the coffee like a peace offering. "I didn't ask you to work through the night." "Didn't work through the night," he replied, glancing up with a slight smile that transformed his weathered face. "But I've been up since before dawn. Old habit. You spend enough time in the mountains, you learn the early hours are the safest." She held out the coffee. "Here." He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants before accepting the cup. His fingers were rough with calluses, his knuckles scarred, but he held the cup gently. "That's kind of you. Thank you. You said you've been in the mountains for 3 weeks? Longer than that, really. I've been living up in the high country for near about 5 years now. Trapping mostly, hunting. I come down to towns like Ruby City a few times a year to trade pelts and restock supplies." He took a sip of the coffee and closed his eyes briefly. "That's good. Real good. Haven't had proper coffee in months. What brings you down this time?" Something flickered in his expression, something dark and painful, but it was gone before she could identify it. "Needed a change of scenery, I guess. The mountains can get lonely after a while." Katherine understood loneliness all too well. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was standing in her yard in a faded calico dress, talking to a half-naked stranger and not feeling afraid. That realization unsettled her more than his presence did. "I should let you work," she said. "Madam, if you don't mind my asking, what happened to your crops? This is good farmland, but it looks like nothing's been tended properly in a while." The question stung because it was true. "My husband died 2 years ago. I've been trying to manage alone, but the drought this summer killed everything. I don't have the money to hire help, and I don't have the strength to do it all myself." Finn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze sweeping across the fields. "You've got water problems. Your irrigation ditches are all filled in, and that well isn't going to support much even after I fix the pump. But I noticed a creek about a half-mile north when I was riding in yesterday. If we could dig a proper channel and set up a water wheel system, you could irrigate the whole north field. That would take weeks of work." "Maybe. Maybe not." He finished the coffee and handed her back the cup. "I don't have anywhere else to be. I can't pay you. I don't recall asking for payment." His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "Sometimes a man just needs a purpose, madam. If you'll have me, I'll help you save this farm." Katherine felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she'd built to protect herself from disappointment and loss. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Finn looked away toward the mountains in the distance. "Because 5 years ago, a stranger showed me kindness when I needed it most, and I never got the chance to repay that debt. Maybe this is how I do it." She didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. "The barn is yours as long as you need it." Over the next 3 days, Katherine watched in amazement as Finn transformed her property. He fixed the well pump so efficiently that water flowed stronger than it had in a year. He repaired every section of broken fence, replaced rotting posts, and rehung the barn door so it swung smooth and true. He worked from dawn until dusk, pausing only to eat the simple meals she brought him and to water his horse. On the 4th day, he announced he was going to start on the irrigation project. Katherine went with him to the creek, carrying surveying tools her husband had left behind. The morning was crisp and clear, and as they walked through the dried grass, she found herself studying Finn more openly. "You know a lot about farming for a mountain man," she observed. He smiled slightly. "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. Worked the land with my father and brothers until I was 23. What happened?" His smile faded. "War happened. The Civil War was over by then, but the fighting never really stopped in Missouri. Bushwhackers and jayhawkers still raiding, neighbor turning on neighbor. My family got caught in the middle of it." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I came home one day to find our farm burned, my father and 2 brothers dead. My mother had died years before, and my youngest brother had already headed west. I buried my family, and then I left. Couldn't stand to stay in a place with so much blood in the soil." Katherine's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But she could hear that it wasn't, not really. Some wounds never fully healed. "I wandered for a couple of years, hired my gun out to wagon trains and cattle drives, got into some trouble. Eventually found my way to the mountains and decided to stay. It was peaceful up there. Simple. Why did you leave the mountains now?" Finn stopped walking and turned to face her. The creek babbled nearby, and a hawk cried overhead. "Because a man can't hide from the world forever. I turned 30 this spring, and I realized I'd been alone for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something, to matter to someone." His eyes searched her face. "When I saw your light the other night, I almost rode past, but something made me stop. Maybe it was Providence, or maybe I was just tired of running." The honesty in his words took her breath away. "I know what you mean about being alone. After my husband died, people came around for a while, bringing food and offering condolences, but eventually they stopped coming, and I was left here with nothing but memories and work. I almost gave up a dozen times." "Why didn't you?" "Pride, I suppose. This was my husband's dream, and I couldn't stand the thought of letting it die with him. Even if I was failing, at least I was still trying." Finn reached out and touched her arm gently, just a brief contact, but it sent warmth through her entire body. "You're not failing, Katherine. You've survived impossible odds for 2 years. That takes more strength than most people have." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and hearing it in his deep, rough voice made something flutter in her chest. "Call me Kate. Only the banker and the preacher call me Katherine." "Kate." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Suits you better." They spent the rest of the morning surveying the land between the creek and the fields, Finn explaining his plan to dig a main channel and several smaller offshoots, using the natural slope of the land to carry water where it was needed. His knowledge was impressive, and Kate found herself drawn not just to his strength and capability, but to his mind, the way he solved problems with creativity and determination. "This will work," he said finally, standing at the edge of what would become the main channel. "But it's going to be hard labor. Digging through this much earth, moving rocks, building sluice gates, it'll take at least 3 weeks, maybe 4. "I'll help." He looked at her seriously. "It's not women's work, Kate. Neither is running a farm alone, but I've been doing it anyway." She lifted her chin. "I'm stronger than I look." "I don't doubt that." His respect was evident in his voice. "All right then, we start tomorrow at first light." That evening, Kate insisted Finn come to the house for dinner instead of eating alone in the barn. She'd made a stew with vegetables from her struggling garden and the last of her canned beef, and she'd baked bread, a luxury she hadn't bothered with in months. Finn arrived freshly washed, his long hair still damp and pushed back from his face. He'd put on a clean shirt, and Kate realized he'd made an effort to be presentable for her table. Something about that gesture touched her deeply. "Smells wonderful," he said as he stepped inside. "It's nothing fancy." "It's a home-cooked meal, and I'm eating it inside instead of by a campfire. That's fancy enough for me." They sat across from each other at the small table, and for the first few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Then Finn asked about her husband, and Kate found herself talking about Thomas in a way she hadn't been able to in the 2 years since his death. "He was a good man," she said softly. "Not always the easiest to live with, but good. He had big dreams for this place, wanted to build a real cattle operation, maybe even buy the adjacent land. He worked himself half to death trying to make it happen." "How did he die?" "Cattle rustlers. They came in the middle of the night, and Thomas heard them trying to break into the barn. He went out with his rifle, and they shot him." Her voice cracked. "I found him in the morning. He'd managed to drag himself back toward the house, but he didn't make it." Finn's hand covered hers on the table, his grip warm and solid. "That's a hard thing to carry." "The worst part is they never found the men who did it. They rode off with 6 of our best cattle, and the sheriff said the trail went cold after a few miles. Thomas died for nothing, and nobody paid for it." "That's not true." Finn's voice was firm. "He died protecting what was his, protecting you. That's not nothing. And the men who killed him will answer for it eventually, if not in this life, then in the next." Kate looked down at their joined hands, surprised by how natural it felt, how right. She should pull away, maintain some distance, but she didn't want to. "You're a good man, Finn Garrett." "I try to be. Don't always succeed, but I try." They talked long into the evening, sharing stories about their lives, their losses, their hopes. Kate learned that Finn had a younger brother named Samuel who'd gone to California during the gold rush and hadn't been heard from in 3 years. She learned that Finn loved to read but rarely had access to books in the mountains, that he could play the harmonica, and that he'd once saved a wounded wolf cub and nursed it back to health over an entire winter. In turn, Kate told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about losing her parents to scarlet fever and coming west with Thomas when she was 19. She told him about the baby she'd lost, a little girl she'd named Grace who'd lived only 3 days. She hadn't spoken about Grace to anyone since the funeral, but something about Finn made her feel safe enough to share that pain. When he finally rose to return to the barn, Kate walked him to the door. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Thank you for dinner," Finn said, "and for the conversation. I'd forgotten how good it feels to talk to someone." "You're welcome any time, I mean that." He smiled, and in the lamplight, Kate could see the man he must have been before grief and violence had driven him into the mountains. Handsome, kind, the sort of man a woman could build a life with. The thought surprised her, and she stepped back quickly. "Good night, Finn." "Good night, Kate." She watched him walk across the yard to the barn, his silhouette dark against the star-filled sky, and wondered what she was getting herself into. The next morning, they began digging the irrigation channel. Finn had marked out the route with stakes and string, and they worked side by side with pickaxes and shovels, breaking through the hard-packed earth. The work was brutal, and within an hour, Kate's hands were blistered despite the gloves she wore. Finn noticed her wincing and stopped immediately. "Let me see." She tried to wave him off, but he took her hands gently and examined the red, raw skin beneath the gloves. His touch was careful, almost tender, and Kate found herself acutely aware of how close he was standing, how she could smell the clean sweat of his skin and the faint scent of leather. "You're going to hurt yourself if you keep going like this," he said. "I'll be fine. I can handle it." "I know you can. But there's a difference between handling it and being smart about it." He released her hands reluctantly. "Why don't you work on clearing rocks from the path ahead? I'll do the heavy digging for now, and once your hands toughen up, you can trade off with me." Kate wanted to argue, wanted to prove she was just as capable as any man, but the pain in her hands made her practical. "All right, but tomorrow I'm digging." Fair enough. They fell into a rhythm over the following days. Kate would work in the mornings when she had the most energy, and Finn would take over the hardest labor during the afternoon heat. They talked as they worked, sharing more stories, debating everything from politics to religion to the best way to make biscuits. Kate found herself laughing more than she had in years, and she caught Finn smiling often, his whole face transforming with the expression. On the 8th day, a wagon rolled up the road to the farm. Kate straightened from where she'd been hauling rocks, shading her eyes against the sun. She recognized the wagon as belonging to Harold Peterson, one of the other farmers from the area, and her stomach tightened with worry. Harold had never been friendly, and she couldn't imagine what brought him out here now. Finn appeared at her side, wiping dirt from his hands. "Friend of yours?" "Not exactly." Harold pulled his wagon to a stop and climbed down, his eyes moving from Kate to Finn and back again with obvious disapproval. "Afternoon, Mrs. Zimmerman. Heard you had a man staying out here. Wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true." Kate felt her cheeks heat with anger and embarrassment. "This is Finn Garrett. He's helping me with some repairs around the farm." "That so?" Harold's tone suggested he thought something entirely different was happening. "Seems mighty inappropriate, a widow woman having a strange man living on her property." Finn stepped forward, and though his voice remained calm, there was steel underneath. "Mr. Peterson, I'm sleeping in the barn and helping Mrs. Zimmerman save her farm from foreclosure. There's nothing inappropriate about honest work." Harold's face reddened. "Now you listen here. I don't know who you think you are, coming into our community, and I think I'm a man helping a neighbor, which is more than I can say for you." Finn's words were quiet, but cutting. "Mrs. Zimmerman has been struggling alone for 2 years, and from what I can tell, nobody's offered her any real help. So maybe instead of spreading gossip and questioning her character, you should be asking yourself why you let a good woman nearly lose everything without lifting a finger to help." The silence that followed was heavy and tense. Kate held her breath, half expecting Harold to take a swing at Finn, but the mountain man's sheer size and obvious strength seemed to give Harold pause. "I'll be sure to mention this to the preacher," Harold said finally, climbing back onto his wagon. "You do that," Kate said, finding her voice, and tell him I'll be in church on Sunday if he has anything to say to me." Harold drove off in a cloud of dust, and Kate turned to Finn, torn between gratitude and frustration. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. I won't stand by and let someone insult you. People are going to talk now. They'll make assumptions." "Let them talk." Finn's eyes were fierce. "You know the truth, and I know the truth. That's all that matters." But Kate knew it wasn't that simple. In a small community like Ruby City, reputation was everything, and she'd just endangered hers by defending a stranger. Still, looking at Finn, at the righteous anger in his face that came from defending her, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "Thank you," she said softly. His expression gentled. "You don't have to thank me for doing what's right." They returned to work, but the encounter with Harold had shaken Kate more than she wanted to admit. That evening, she was quieter than usual as they ate dinner together, picking at her food while Finn watched her with concern. "What are you thinking about?" he asked finally. "The bank. Harold's visit reminded me that I only have 2 months left before they foreclose. Even with the irrigation system, I won't be able to grow a crop in time to make the payment." Finn was quiet for a moment. "How much do you owe?" $300. He let out a low whistle. "That's a considerable sum." "I know. I've been trying to figure out how to raise it, but I don't have anything left to sell except the farm itself, and nobody wants to buy land in the middle of a drought." She looked up at him, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "I'm going to lose everything, Finn. No matter how hard we work, it won't be enough." Finn reached across the table and took her hand. "Don't give up yet. We'll figure something out." "How?" "Unless you have $300 hidden in your saddlebags, I don't see a solution." "I don't have $300, he admitted. "But I have pelts. Good quality beaver and fox pelts that I've been collecting for months. I was planning to take them to Boise to sell, but I could sell them in Ruby City and give you the money." Kate jerked her hand back. "Absolutely not. I can't take your money. It's not charity. Call it an investment. You use the money to save the farm, and when you get the irrigation working and bring in a good harvest next year, you pay me back. With interest, if it makes you feel better." "Finn, that's your entire livelihood. Those pelts represent months of work. And this farm represents years of your life, your husband's life, his dreams." Finn leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Kate, I've been alone in the mountains for 5 years, and I've got more money saved up than I need. What's the point of having it if I can't use it to help someone I care about?" The last words hung in the air between them, significant and weighty. Someone I care about. Kate's heart began to pound, because she knew she cared about him too, more than she should after such a short time, more than was wise for a widow who barely knew this man. "I can't ask you to do that," she whispered. "You're not asking. I'm offering." He stood and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye to eye. "Let me help you, Kate. Please." Looking into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the genuine desire to save her farm, Kate felt the last of her resistance crumble. "All right, but I will pay you back, every penny, even if it takes years." "I believe you." He smiled and rose, squeezing her shoulder gently before returning to his seat. I'll take the pelts into town tomorrow and see what I can get for them." That night, Kate lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Finn Garrett had come into her life less than 2 weeks ago, a stranger who'd asked only to sleep in her barn, and now he was saving her farm, defending her honor, and making her feel things she'd thought died with her husband. It was too much, too fast, and yet it felt right in a way she couldn't explain. She thought about the way his hand felt covering hers, the sound of his laugh, the gentle way he treated his horse, and the careful way he'd bandaged her blistered hands. She thought about the sadness in his eyes when he talked about his family, and the peace she saw in his face when he was working with the land. Finn Garrett was a good man, maybe the best she'd ever known, and she was falling in love with him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, it filled her with a quiet joy she hadn't felt in years. Finn left at dawn the next morning, his horse loaded with bundled pelts. Kate watched him ride away, her stomach tight with worry despite his confident assurance that he'd return by evening. The hours passed slowly as she worked on clearing more of the irrigation channel, her mind constantly drifting to Finn and what he was doing. What if the pelts didn't bring enough money? What if something happened to him in town? What if he decided not to come back? That last thought was the worst, and Kate hated herself for even thinking it. Finn had given her no reason to doubt his word, but years of loss had taught her that people left one way or another, and she'd be alone again. The sun was setting when she finally heard hoofbeats and saw Finn riding up the path. She ran out to meet him, relief flooding through her so strongly her knees went weak. Finn dismounted and pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag, holding it out to her. $340. The merchant in town said my pelts were the highest quality he'd seen in years. Kate took the pouch with shaking hands, feeling the weight of the coins inside. It was more than enough to pay the bank and have a little left over for seeds and supplies. Finn, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me stay and help you finish the irrigation system. Say you'll let me see this through with you. Of course you can stay, as long as you want. Something flashed in his eyes, something hot and intense that made Kate's breath catch. Then he smiled and stepped back, putting a proper distance between them. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. The next day, Kate went to town and paid her debt to the bank. The banker's surprise was almost comical when she counted out the full amount plus interest, and she left his office with her head held high, the deed to her farm safely in her possession. On the way back, she stopped at the general store for supplies and ran into Reverend Matthews. Mrs. Zimmerman, he said gravely, I was hoping to speak with you. Kate braced herself. Reverend? I've heard concerning reports about a man staying on your property. Harold Peterson suggested that the arrangement might be inappropriate. Harold Peterson should mind his own business, Kate said sharply. Mr. Garrett has been helping me save my farm, and he's been nothing but respectful. He sleeps in the barn, we work during the day, and that's all there is to it. I'm not questioning your integrity, my dear. I'm simply concerned about appearances. You're a young widow, and a single man living on your property, even in the barn, gives people cause to talk. Then let them talk. I've lost a husband, a child, and nearly lost my home. If the biggest scandal in Ruby City is that I accepted help from a kind man, then so be it. The Reverend studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. Of course. Forgive me. And I'm glad to hear you were able to make your payment to the bank. That's wonderful news. Kate softened slightly. Thank you, Reverend. I'll see you on Sunday. She drove her wagon back to the farm, feeling lighter than she had in months. The farm was hers, truly hers, and she had a future again. When she arrived, she found Finn had made significant progress on the irrigation channel, and she jumped down from the wagon seat, running to where he stood waist-deep in the ditch. I did it, she called. The farm is safe. Finn's face broke into a huge grin, and he climbed out of the ditch, not seeming to care that he was covered in dirt and sweat. That's wonderful, Kate. Without thinking, Kate threw her arms around him in a hug. He stiffened for just a second, then his arms came around her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle. She laughed, pure and joyful, and when he set her down, they stood there holding each other, the moment stretching and shifting into something deeper. Finn's hands were warm on her back, and Kate could feel the solid strength of his chest against her cheek. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and the expression on his face made her heart skip. He was looking at her like she was precious, like she mattered, like she was everything. Kate, he said quietly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. Yes? I should let you go. What if I don't want you to? His eyes darkened and his hands tightened on her waist. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Kate reached up and touched his bearded jaw, marveling at her own boldness. You came into my life at my darkest moment, and you brought light back. You've given me hope and help and friendship, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. You won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. I promise. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Kate didn't move. When his lips touched hers, gentle and questioning, she kissed him back, pouring all her gratitude and affection and growing love into that single kiss. It was soft and sweet, nothing like the passionate kisses she'd shared with her husband in the early days of their marriage, but it was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Finn rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that for days, he admitted. Me too. This changes things between us. I know. Is that all right? Finn pulled back and cupped her face in his large, calloused hands. Kate, I came down from the mountains because I was tired of being alone, but I never expected to find someone like you. You're strong and brave and beautiful, and I'm falling in love with you. If that's all right with you, then yes, this is more than all right." Tears spilled down Kate's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I'm falling in love with you too. I didn't think I could feel this way again after Thomas, but you've made me want to live again, not just survive." He kissed her again, longer this time, and Kate felt like she was coming home after a long journey. When they finally separated, both of them were smiling, giddy with the newness of their feelings. "We should probably talk about what this means," Finn said practically. "I don't want to do anything that would damage your reputation further." "I don't care about my reputation, but I do care about doing this right." Kate took his hand. "Court me properly. Come to Sunday dinner, take me on walks, let people see that you're a respectable man with honorable intentions." "I can do that," he grinned, "though I should probably start by actually asking if I can court you. Kate Zimmerman, would you allow me the honor of courting you with the intention of marriage?" The word marriage should have scared her, but it didn't. "Yes, Finn Garrett, I would be honored." Over the next month, they fell into a new rhythm. Finn continued to sleep in the barn to maintain propriety, but they spent every waking hour together, working on the farm and the irrigation system. They attended church together on Sundays, enduring the stares and whispers with heads held high, and slowly, people began to accept their relationship. Finn proved to be everything Kate could have hoped for in a partner. He was patient when she struggled with heavy work, encouraging when she got discouraged, and gentle when she needed comfort. He told her stories about the mountains and taught her to identify animal tracks. He played his harmonica in the evenings, filling the air with sweet, melancholy melodies that made her heart ache in the best way. Kate, in turn, showed Finn what it meant to have a home again. She cooked his favorite foods, mended his clothes, and created a space where he felt welcomed and valued. She listened to his stories about his family and his years alone, helping him heal old wounds, just as he helped her heal hers. The irrigation system was completed in early November, just as the first snows began to dust the mountains. Finn stood with Kate at the main sluice gate, and together they opened it, watching as water rushed down the channel and spread across the dry fields. "It's working," Kate breathed, watching the water flow exactly as Finn had planned. "Of course it's working. I told you it would." He put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth. "Next spring you'll be able to plant everything you wanted. This land is going to bloom again." "We'll be able to plant everything," she corrected, "if you're still planning to stay." Finn turned her to face him. "Kate, I told you I'm not going anywhere. I meant it. I want to build a life here with you if you'll have me." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I am." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. It's the only thing I have left of her. I know we haven't been courting long, and I know some people will say it's too soon, but I'm 30 years old, and I know my own mind. I love you, Kate. Will you marry me?" Kate looked at the ring, then at Finn's face, seeing the hope and vulnerability there. She thought about how her life had changed since the night he'd knocked on her door, how he'd saved not just her farm but her future, her heart, her very soul. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." Finn slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting all this time to come home to her. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, and Kate felt the last pieces of her broken heart knit back together. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church. Kate wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and Finn bought a new suit from the general store. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, and a surprising number of people from town attended, including some who'd been skeptical about their relationship. Harold Peterson even came, though he left right after the ceremony without speaking to them. Kate didn't care. She had Finn, she had her farm, and she had a future full of possibilities. The wedding night, Finn carried Kate over the threshold of the farmhouse, and for the first time, he climbed the stairs to the bedroom instead of heading to the barn. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. Finn was gentle with her, mindful that it had been years since she'd been with a man, and Kate marveled at how different it felt to be with someone who truly loved her, who cherished her. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Finn traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again." Kate turned to look at him, reaching up to push his long hair back from his face. "Are you happy?" "More than I have words for. I spent 5 years hiding in the mountains, thinking I didn't deserve happiness after everything I'd lost, everything I'd done. And then I found you, and you made me remember what it feels like to be alive." "What you'd done?" Kate caught the phrase. "What do you mean?" Finn was quiet for a long moment. "I wasn't always a good man, Kate. After my family died, I was angry at the world. I hired my gun out to some people who weren't on the right side of the law. I did things I'm not proud of, hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. That's part of why I went to the mountains. I was trying to outrun my past." "We all have things in our past we wish we could change," Kate said softly. "I wasn't always a good wife to Thomas. I resented him sometimes for bringing me out here, for working himself to death. I said harsh words I can never take back. But that's not who we are now. We're not defined by our worst moments, but by what we choose to do with the time we have left." Finn kissed her forehead. "How did you get so wise?" "Grief teaches you things. Loss teaches you what really matters." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and when Kate woke in the morning to find Finn still beside her, his arm heavy across her waist, she felt a peace she'd never known before. Winter settled over the farm, and Kate and Finn spent the cold months preparing for spring. They ordered seeds from catalogs, repaired tools, and made plans for how to use the newly irrigated fields. Finn built a new chicken coop and fixed the roof where it had been leaking. Kate sewed new curtains and made quilts to keep them warm through the frigid Idaho nights. They celebrated Christmas together, just the two of them, with a small tree Finn cut from the woods and decorations Kate made from scraps of fabric and paper. Finn gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pens, encouraging her to write down her thoughts and experiences. Kate gave him a new harmonica and a thick wool coat she'd sewn herself. As the year turned and 1879 began, Kate realized she felt different. It took her a few weeks to identify the signs, but when she finally accepted what they meant, she was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. She told Finn one evening in late January as they sat by the fire. He'd been reading aloud from a book of poetry, and she'd been pretending to sew, too nervous to focus on her stitches. "Finn, I need to tell you something." He looked up immediately, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" "I'm going to have a baby, our baby." For a moment he just stared at her, and Kate's heart sank. Maybe he didn't want children. Maybe this was too much, too fast. But then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it completely. "A baby?" he said, his voice full of wonder. "Yes. I'm about 2 months along, I think." Finn set down his book and crossed to where she sat, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands. "Kate, that's incredible. Are you happy about it?" "I am, but I'm scared too. I lost a baby before, and I don't know if I can survive that again." "You won't be alone this time. I'll be here with you every step of the way." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to take care of you both, and this baby is going to be healthy and strong. I can feel it." Kate covered his hand with hers, feeling tears slide down her cheeks. "I love you so much. I love you too, both of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring. Kate was sick in the mornings for the first few months, but Finn was patient and caring, bringing her weak tea and dry toast, rubbing her back when she felt queasy. As her belly began to swell, he took over more of the heavy farm work, insisting she rest and take care of herself. They planted the fields in April, using the irrigation system to ensure the crops had enough water. The weather cooperated, bringing regular rain but not flooding, and by May, green shoots were pushing up through the dark soil. It was the most beautiful sight Kate had ever seen. By June, the wheat and corn were growing tall and healthy, and Kate's belly was round and prominent. The baby moved constantly, and Finn loved to feel the kicks and rolls, his face lighting up with amazement every time. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" he asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach. "I don't know. What do you hope for?" "I just hope for healthy. Boy or girl doesn't matter to me, as long as you're both all right." If it's a boy, I want to name him after your father. What was his name? Finn's eyes grew misty. William. But Kate, you don't have to. I want to. Your father would have been proud of the man you've become, of the life you're building. It's right to honor him. And if it's a girl? I was thinking Grace, for the daughter I lost. But we could do something else if that's too painful. Grace is perfect. Finn kissed her gently. Either way, this child is going to be so loved. In late July, the harvest began. Finn hired 2 men from town to help, and they worked from dawn to dusk bringing in the wheat. The yield was beyond anything Kate had dared hope for, and when Finn took the grain to market, he returned with more money than they'd need to make it through the winter, and then some. We did it, Kate said, looking at the money spread across the kitchen table. We actually did it. You did it, Finn corrected. You refused to give up, even when everything seemed impossible. I just helped. You did more than help. You saved me, Finn. In every way a person can be saved. The baby came in early September, on a crisp morning when the leaves were just beginning to turn gold. Kate's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when she was certain she wouldn't survive it. But Finn stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to let her give up. When the baby finally came, wailing and red-faced and perfect, the midwife placed the tiny bundle in Kate's arms. You have a daughter, she said, smiling. Kate looked down at the tiny face, seeing Finn's eyes and her own dark hair, and felt her heart expand to make room for this new, overwhelming love. Grace, she whispered. Her name is Grace. Finn touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, his eyes shining with tears. She's perfect. You're both perfect. Grace was a good baby, healthy and strong, and she brought a new kind of joy to the farm. Finn was a devoted father, taking his turns walking the floor with her at night, changing her diapers without complaint, and singing to her in his deep, rumbling voice. Watching him with their daughter, Kate fell in love with him all over again. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. They had 2 more children, a son they named William in 1881, and another daughter, Elizabeth, in 1883. The farm prospered, and they were able to buy the adjacent land Finn had always wanted, expanding their operation to include cattle as well as crops. Finn's younger brother, Samuel, showed up unexpectedly in the spring of 1884, having finally made his fortune in California and wanting to reconnect with his only living family. The reunion was emotional and joyful, and Samuel became a regular visitor to the farm, a beloved uncle to the children. Kate never forgot the night Finn had knocked on her door, asking only to sleep in the barn. She thought about it every time she looked at her thriving farm, her beautiful children, her strong, gentle husband. That single act of kindness, of opening her door to a stranger, had changed everything. One evening in the fall of 1888, Kate and Finn sat on the porch swing, watching their children play in the yard. Grace was 9 now, tall and serious like her mother. William was 7, adventurous and bold. Elizabeth was 5, sweet-tempered and loving. The harvest had been good again. The cattle were healthy, and life was peaceful in a way Kate had never imagined possible. Do you ever miss the mountains? She asked Finn, leaning against his shoulder. Sometimes, he admitted. I miss the quiet, the simplicity. But I wouldn't trade this life for anything. The mountains were where I went to hide from the world. This is where I learned to live in it again. I'm glad you stopped that night. I'm glad you asked to sleep in the barn. Finn laughed. So am I. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Kate corrected, smiling up at him. The best was asking me to marry you. You're right about that. He kissed her, soft and familiar. 10 years of marriage making the gesture comfortable, but no less meaningful. I love you, Kate Garrett. I love you too, Finn. They sat together as the sun set, painting the Idaho sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, their children's laughter ringing through the air. The farm that Kate had nearly lost was now a thriving homestead, filled with love and life and possibility. And the mountain man who'd come down from the high country looking for purpose had found it here, in this place, with this woman and the family they'd built together. It was more than either of them had dared dream of that desperate September night in 1878 when a widow had opened her door to a stranger. But dreams had a way of growing when you nurtured them with love, hard work, and faith in the future. And Kate and Finn had plenty of all three, enough to last them the rest of their lives together and beyond. The story of the farm continued through the generations. Grace grew up to be a teacher, educating children throughout the Ruby City area. William took over the farm when Finn grew too old to manage it alone, expanding the cattle operation even further. Elizabeth married a doctor and moved to Boise, but visited often, bringing her own children to learn about their heritage. Finn and Kate grew old together on the land they'd saved, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1928, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. By then, Kate's hair was white, and Finn walked with a cane, but the bond between them was as strong as ever. Finn passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1930 at the age of 82. Kate held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke at losing him, she was grateful for the 52 years they'd had together. She lived another 5 years, spending her time writing in the journal Finn had given her that first Christmas, recording their story for future generations. She wrote about the night a desperate widow had let a stranger sleep in her barn, and how by morning he'd begun the work of saving her farm. She wrote about love found in the midst of loss, about second chances and new beginnings. She wrote about the family they'd built and the legacy they were leaving behind. When Kate died in 1935 at the age of 81, she was buried next to Finn under a big oak tree on the farm. Their children carved a simple inscription on their shared headstone. Together, they turned a dying dream into a living legacy. The farm remained in the family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But it all began with a knock on a door, a request to sleep in a barn, and two lonely souls who found in each other the courage to hope again. And every year, when the irrigation system Finn built still brought water to the fields, when the harvest came in full and rich, the family remembered the mountain man who'd come down from the high country and the widow who'd given him a chance. They remembered that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the simplest acts of kindness, and that love, when it's real and true, can transform not just 2 lives, but countless generations to come. The story of Finn and Kate became legend in Ruby City, passed down as an example of what faith, hard work, and love could accomplish. Young couples starting out would visit the farm, looking at the old irrigation channels in the original barn, now preserved as a historical landmark. And they'd hear the tale of how a mountain man had saved a farm in a single night of hard work and determination. But those who really listened, who paid attention to the details, understood that the saving had taken much longer than a single night. It had taken weeks of backbreaking labor, months of courtship, years of partnership, and a lifetime of love. The night in the barn had been just the beginning, the first step on a journey that would span decades and change the landscape of Idaho farming forever. In the end, that's what made it a story worth telling. Not because it was easy or quick, but because it was real. 2 people who'd lost everything found each other at exactly the right moment, and together they built something that would outlast them both. That was the true miracle, the real happily ever after. Not perfection, but persistence. Not magic, but love expressed through 1,000 small acts of devotion and care. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Finn and Kate were together still, watching over the land they'd saved and the family they'd created, proud of what they'd accomplished and grateful for every moment they'd been given. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their legacy secure in the fertile Idaho soil and in the hearts of everyone who'd been touched by their love. The mountain man had come down from the high country looking for redemption, and he'd found it in the arms of a widow who needed saving just as much as he did. And together, they'd created something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. That was the ending their story deserved, the one they'd earned through struggle and sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to each other. It was, in every sense of the word, a love story for the ages.